Dear friends, let's start. We plan to have a presentation by Philippe Van Paris, our dear friend from Belgium. Philippe Van Paris, one second. Now I will mute you all for better performance. Philippe, word is yours.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah? Yeah?
Yes, we hear you. We are all muted, that's why...
Okay, that's fine. But you... Okay, so thank you very much for this opportunity to say something about the final results, or not quite final, but really it's supposed to be the final report on the Finnish experiment. And so I thought it was very important for us to react very quickly to this final report, because there are obviously many ways in which the results could be framed. And so I'm going to make this brief introduction, and then we'll be able to talk together. There are at least two, perhaps three Finnish participants, including my old friend Osmo Soininvaara, who is the person who probably most contributed to launching the debate on basic income in Finland many years back. He was the leader of the Finnish Green Party for quite a while. He's also a statistician by training, so he's able to assess these experiments with the professional eye, and he's still now a member of the local council, if that hasn't changed, of the local council in Helsinki. So he and the other Finnish participants will be able to supplement or correct what I'm going to say. I'm going to go in 5 quick steps. First, remind you of what the experiment consisted in. Secondly, mention the big, surprising, unanticipated policy change that risked smashing the whole experiment, and that was implemented midway through the experiment. It's very important for the interpretation of the final results. 3, I'll give then the main results as regards the impact on employment. 4, I'll look at a number of differences in the impact on the employment of various categories of the population, and that's quite puzzling in some respects. There are some questions for further research. And finally, I'll say a word about the impact of the experiment on dimensions other than employment. So first, what did the experiment consist in? In Finland, there is some sort of guaranteed minimum income system of a means-tested form, where people, so at the lowest level, get 560 euros per month. But it is conditional, because it's obviously, it depends on, it's means tested, it depends on your income. It's also subjected to availability on the labor market, and it depends on your household situation. So the experiment consisted in taking a random sample of 2,000 people among the 150,000 people who were benefiting from this scheme. And for 2 years, they could receive these 560 euros unconditionally. That is, they could combine it with income from other sources. They were no longer pushed into a job. The bureaucracy left them in peace. And if they went to live with someone else, they were still receiving their 560 euros. What is important to also for the interpretation of the outcomes is that these 560 euros could be supplemented also for people who receive them as a basic income, could be supplemented in a means tested way. People, you, on top of the 560 euros of basic income, you could get family benefits or child benefits, 150 euros if you have one child, up to 300 euros per month if you have 3 or more children. And you could also get, in addition to your basic income, you could get housing benefits. Housing benefits would vary greatly from cheap rural municipalities to Helsinki, the capital, where this supplement could go to 600 or 600 euros or more. So that's the experiment. So for 2 years, from the 1st of January 2017 to the 31st of December 2018, these 2,000 people randomly chosen, and they had no choice. They were forced to get, if they were picked, they were forced to go into the experiment. They received these 560 euros unconditionally. Okay, now point 2, then something happened midway. So on the 1st of January 2018, the beginning of the second year of the experiment, the government, right of center government, decided to introduce a new policy called the activation model. And that meant that all the people who received means-tested benefits were subjected to an increased pressure to go to work. So if they had not worked for at least 18 days every 3 months, or if they hadn't participated in a training session for a number of days, then they lost 5% of their total benefit. Now, this concerned, of course, most of the people in the control group, in the people who were used as a point of comparison for the experimental group, for the people who were receiving a basic income. And of course, what could be expected is that as a result of that, these people would be pushed more into work than the people with a basic income. This has to be qualified somewhat because, as I just mentioned before, people with a basic income could also only receive the additional benefits, child benefits, housing benefits, if they're satisfied these conditions. So it's, among the people in the experimental group, the people with a basic income, far less of them, less than half, received these additional benefits, and they were also less important for them. So if this reform had any impact, it was going to be an impact concentrated essentially on the people in the control group. So one could expect that as a result of that, the employment in that category would be greater. So let's look if does the screen sharing work? Can you see a graph? Yeah, okay. So this is an overview then taken from the final report in Finnish, which I spent some time reading it with Google Translate. It didn't work too badly. So here what you have is the following. It indicates, so starting in October 2016, so starting in November 2016, so just before the beginning of the experiment. So the first 2 months on the left are a month before the beginning of the experiment. Then you have the 12 months in the first year of the experiment, and then the 12 months in the second year of the experiment. In the first year of the experiment, as we knew already last year on the basis of a preliminary report, there was some very slight difference on average between the experimental group. These are the black spots. The black spots are the people who received the basic income, so received the 560 euros unconditionally. There was a very slight advantage for them. Of course, the key question there was, are the basic income recipients going to work more than the others because they can combine the basic income with income from work? Or are they going to work less than the others because they are no longer pushed into a job? And the conclusion on the basis of the data available for the first year was there's no statistically significant difference. There is a very slight advantage for basic income experiments, but we cannot see that this is a real effect more than some sort of random noise. Then came the introduction of the so-called activation model. You can see that the participation in the labor market is higher in the second year than in the first. No one can say that this is because of the activation model, because as you can see, is the continuation of a trend that, of an increasing trend that exists already in the first year. It reflects the fact that people who were unemployed, long-term unemployed at the beginning of the period, well, as time goes on, a number of them find a job. But you might have expected that as a result of this activation model that has a stronger grip on the people in the control group, that the people in the control group, that is with only conditional benefits, would work then more than basic income recipients. But this is not what happened. And in the second year, the difference between the two groups widened, the gap widened, and became statistically significant. Over the whole year, the basic income recipients worked on average 6 days more than the control group, than people in the control group. And so this is indicated so in and so by the difference between the two curves. So on average, that amounts to 6 days over the year. It's not huge. Some people who were hoping to make big savings as a result of introducing a basic income were disappointed. But clearly the effect that's linked to the fact that you can combine your basic income with income from work, this effect weighed more than the impact of pressure to go and work. So this is the main result. Then let me see if I can get back to, yeah. And then I come to fourth point in my brief presentation. So can I, no, that's again the same. We try, which is then if we look, no, it keeps being the same. So how can I get rid of that? No. Stop share. So what I want to show now, and I don't know why, share computer, well, let me say this verbally, then if I may be able to show it in the discussion. Let me then go through the can you see it now? Can you see a table? Yeah, okay. So I apologize for the fact that it's in Finnish again, but nevertheless, it's good to have the figures under your eyes. This indicates, in fact, the figures that I thought were most relevant and less affected by some turbulences at the beginning or at the end, are figures so for the 1 year that goes from November of the first year to October of the second year. Okay, so over the 12-month period. And so the average in that period was also 6 days more. That's the figure in the first column at the top. And for the whole of the population, on average, so the basic income recipients worked 6 days more than the control group. Now, there were differences according to categories. So the first group of 3 lines that I underlined in yellow indicates differences according to age group. So look only at the first column. The last column indicates the number of people in this group among the 2,000 in the sample. So you can see the difference in age group. So the group that was most, when the impact of the basic income was largest, it's always positive for all the groups, is the group of the 35 to 44. So forgot to say at the beginning that all the people in the sample were long-term unemployed people aged between 25 and 59. Then not underlined in yellow, so the following two lines refer to the difference between genders. So the impact was not significantly different, so there was not statistically significant difference between men and women. The next two lines, where you see 4.56, 6.71, is the difference between education levels. So the less educated people were less impacted. So the impact was greater for people with secondary education or higher education than people with primary education. Then what was significant and surprising, still called for an explanation, but perhaps Osmo or the other Finnish participants may have an explanation. It's the big difference between people who have Finnish or Swedish as their native language and people who have another language as their mother tongue. So there's a difference between 3.61 and 13.45. In each case, the number of days people with a basic income work in addition, on average, to the number of days worked by people who receive the standard conditional means tested basic income. And you can see in the last column for those lines that you have nearly 500 people who don't have Finnish or Swedish as mother tongue. That means, and the bulk of them are recent immigrants, nearly 500 out of the 2,000. And these people were employed to a significantly greater extent than the people of local origin. Then the next three lines refer to the family situation. And there again, it was surprising because the 1366, so nearly 14 days more than the others, refers to the people in families, in couples with children. The people without children, single, are in the second row, so where the impact was insignificant. And then in the third row, you have the single parents. And so you can see that the impact of having a basic income on people with children and on single parents, on couples with children and on single parents is significant, whereas it is insignificant for people without children, which is somewhat surprising, especially bearing in mind that you get means tested top-ups if you have children, not very large, but nevertheless they are there for people with children and not for the others. And finally, where you can see the three lines there with Roman numbers, that refers to different types of municipalities. In the first, so the category 1, 2 refers to more rural municipalities, and the last line refers to Helsinki. You can see that the impact was it's the other way around. Sorry, it's 1, 2 refers to the Helsinki area, and 4 to the rural area. In fact, the impact was significantly larger in rural areas than in Helsinki. This may be due to the fact that you have significant means-tested housing benefits in cities, and particularly in expensive cities, relatively expensive cities like Helsinki and not elsewhere. So I think so it's interesting to look at these data. So in all these cases, the impact of the basic income is not huge, but it is statistically significant, and there are statistically significant differences between the various categories. So let me just then conclude that as the fifth component of what I wanted to say, of course, what does this all show? Does this show that a basic income is a good idea? Of course, it's not sufficient to show that basic income is a good idea. It's not even sufficient to show that a basic income of 560 euros in Finland today is economically sustainable, because no one in this sample was working at the beginning of the period. So the experiment doesn't give you any idea about the way in which people who are at work would react to having a basic income. Will many of them reduce their working time? It's certainly part of the intention of a basic income. The number of people who can't reduce their working time today could reduce their working time. Will some people interrupt work altogether for a certain period? Certainly some people will do so, but we don't know to what extent, and therefore there is no way of drawing, if only for that reason, but for a number of reasons, to draw any conclusion about the economic sustainability of a basic income from these data. All we can say is that introducing a basic income at that level in the particular Finnish context will not have as a result that people will massively abstain from participating in the labor market. It clearly has, and more than the activation model, an impact on helping people into a job. In particular, it seems people who are recent immigrants, and in particular also people with children. Moreover, of course, our defense, and I'm sure all the people who've joined us today will share that view, our defense of basic income is, of course, not focused exclusively on this question of on employment. And there were a number of other results that were not new in the report published last year, that were already present in the report that was published last year, because it was based on interviews conducted at the end of the second year that were already available then. And there are a number of other effects on other dimensions. And what was revealed by the comparison between the interviews with the control group and with the basic income recipients is that basic income recipients had a far more favorable, significantly more favorable view about their state of health. They were suffering less from stress than than the people in the control group. And also an aspect which Oli Kangas investigated particularly, they were more trusting towards the government, towards and towards other people. It's Oli Kangas presented those results already at the Hyderabad Congress. Some of you may remember that. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say. Of course, basic income, as we just heard also before, is as a result of the virus crisis, has become even more popular than it had become since 2016 or so, where there was a big upsurge of interest in it. It comes in many variants and many different levels in various countries, etc., supported by very different people. But so therefore, reflecting on the outcomes of this experiment is certainly very useful, not because they could give us a decisive answer to the question, well, is basic income sustainable or not? Is it, all things considered, a good idea or not? But it will, for people who are convinced that it's the way forward, because it gives more dignity and more freedom to the people who have least of it, it will help us frame the proposal for a basic income also in such a way that we can reduce, we can attenuate the possible negative side effects it may have. And so reflecting in particular on this table I'm showing here and trying to see what lies beyond these differences may be of significant interest, not only in Finland, but in many other countries. So that's what I wanted to throw in by way of introduction to the conversation.
May I a little explain the figures?
Yeah, that's Osmo speaking. Yeah.
Yes. You must remember that all these groups, the agreement group and the control group, consist of people who had no working history, or at least no working history in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Which means they were socially very hard group, and people who had problems with their health or ability to work or so on. And in the Finnish history, any incentives to get them to work have not worked. And so the activization model didn't work either.
No.
But you can see that the immigrants were in a better shape, because if an immigrant in Finland has no working history, that doesn't mean that he or she is ill or has mental problems or something like that. And so these immigrants were in a much better shape, and that means also there was this, and that's why their response was better. And then there was the family.
Yeah.
A family with one and wife and man and children are in a better shape than people living alone or single women with children or something like that. And that's why these families, you see, they were the other group that could respond to that. But it's a pity that this experiment was done like that, because these people are very difficult to get into work. But what is nice, that their quality of life increased a lot. Although not more money was used for them. They had the same level of benefit than before, but because it was unconventional and they could plan their economics better, they just felt life much better, and that's also a result.
Sure. Yeah. But for the families, do you have an explanation for that? Why people with children were more? You said because
people with social problems and healthy problems usually don't have a husband or wife. They are divorced or have never get married, and if they have got married, the family usually breaks down, and so among these groups, those people with a good family are in a much better shape than the others. That comes from that comes from every other statistics as well.
So you mean they are sort of psychologically in a better state, and therefore the additional social additional economic security they get from the basic income gives them.
They don't drink that much, and their health is better, and so on.
Okay. Yeah. So whereas the single people without children are people who are
Yes, especially men without. Single men are in the worst shape, because there is some reason that they haven't got a woman.
If I can ask you another question, Aspo.
Yes.
So there is we cannot interpret this table by saying, well, on average, immigrants have more children, and it's for the reason very plausible to me that you mentioned. Immigrants.
Well, I think that they are in the beginning a totally different group, because they don't have a working history in Finland.
Yeah.
But the reason for not having a working history is that they had just come into the country.
Sure, and they may have been discriminated, etc. But But could that not be the explanation for the family aspect? If they have more children than the locals?
That is possible. We should look at the data more. But well, it does not need this kind of explanation.
Okay.
And in fact not, because on those years, most of these immigrants were men that come from Iraq and without a family.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, yeah. So Ali, I suppose we can open more widely for questions, to which Osmo may be able to reply better than me.
Philip, maybe Pekka would like to say a few words also.
Yeah, okay.
After these three keynote speeches, let's say, then we can continue. Dear
Okay,
Pekka,
Philip already said what is about the employment. There is not much more to say. Good thing is basic income was better for employment than the active model, which all our right-hand parties were keen in. But more revolutionary results were in the mental health division. With the questionnaires there, for example, 1/3 of depression was cut just with basic income. Those unemployed people who were with normal working benefit, 32%.
Dear Pekka, we cannot hear you well. Pekka?
That effect is more than...
Pekka, would you please repeat your last 2-3 sentences, please? We couldn't hear you.
Okay. So the main result was that the mental health of the basic income recipients was much better than the other group. For example, 32% of those who got normal working benefits were depressed at least mildly, but only 22% of those who got same amount of money with basic income, but didn't have all the time bureaucrats saying what to do and what not. That difference is better than can be reached by drugs for mental illnesses. They normally diminish depression only by 20 or 25%. Basic income diminishes depression by more than 30%. So even if the effects with employment were not so big, they would have been bigger if this would have been 4 or 5 years. Because I know many went to study, and that was not studied here. And if they study, they get employment later. It's the same with better mental health. First they feel better, then they can study or make their own enterprise and get work.
Pekka, if I can ask you a question about that. So those results are results that were already reported last year. And so they are based on these questionnaires that were sent to both the control group and the experimental group. But where
there were two studies there.
Yeah.
One was those, it was about 5,000 sent to control group and 2,000 sent to the research group. One was those quantitative formulas. And then there was study of about 100 people where they were studied more deeply.
Yeah.
And both of those results were reported a little 1 year ago, but much more deeply now.
Yeah.
Because now they have also the second year results available.
But the questionnaires that were presented last year were questionnaires at the end of the second year. So, where the rate of response, I remember, was something like 20% in the two
20%
groups.
in the control group and 30% of the
That's it. Yeah,
research group.
Okay.
But it's quite normal in Finland nowadays.
Yeah.
When I sent that same kind of research papers, questionnaires 30 years ago, the normal turnout was about 50 or 60%.
Yeah. I think that's.
But it has gone down now. But the amounts are so big and the differences in results are so big.
Yeah.
I think those results are very significant. Because in Finland, for example, we pay only the costs of mental illnesses and sick leaves and so on, 11 billion euros a year. So if we can reduce those even 10%, that's 1 billion euros savings. So it has also economic value.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Dear friends, I see that there are many questions. Let's continue with them. Janus, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Actually, somehow my question or comment already received an answer, but what the Finnish experiments results has shown, perhaps it's just my speculation, but UBI could maybe it doesn't give the people more intention to have work, but maybe it gives to people more how to say concurrence ability. So if they are the potential employees, then as the UBI gives them makes them more happy, more optimistic, and so on, and the employers like more the joyful and optimistic people. So they have just more luck in the labor market. It's my little speculation, and perhaps also why the families with children were have more success in the labor market.
Okay.
Thank you, Janus. I guess, okay, let's continue. Maybe Diana.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Philip, for taking the time to present to us. This is very helpful. Very interesting. I will share the link to your article, which I read a few days ago, which kind of also summarizes your points, but in a less detail. But I will share it for everyone, for those who haven't seen it, in the chat box. I have two questions regarding the assessment of the impact of that policy that was introduced 1 year into the experiment. Philippe, did I understand correctly that you said that we can't say whether this policy resulted in the increase in the difference between the days worked, because there was an ongoing trend going upwards? And if so, so yeah, this is the first question. And the second question, just in general, do we have information on the nature of the jobs that these people in the experiment group were able to get? So is it all part-time work? Is it all intermittent work? Or have any of the respondents moved into more permanent jobs? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So let me clarify. So the first point. So that's your first question. So activation model introduced on the 1st of January 2018, beginning of the second year, and it applied throughout that year. In fact, it has been scrapped by the new government, which is headed by the Social Democrats. It's now been scrapped. So, but it did last for the whole of that year. So, did it have any impact on the employment of the people in the control group or in the experimental group? We simply don't know, because we didn't do their randomized experiment. It's not as if some people had been subjected to that model and then randomly chosen people not subjected. So, and we don't. So that we don't know, because we don't have a way of assessing the causal impact. And in fact, what I said is that when you look at the trend already the first year, it looks like simply the continuation of that trend. And so it really suggests that if it had any impact, it was really insignificant. But nevertheless, it is relevant then to the interpretation of the results, because given that the impact, if there was any impact, was bound to be greater on the people in the control group, because in the control group on the 1st of January 2018, about 2/3 had these conditional benefits, and so were put under great pressure, whereas less than half these people, less than half of the basic income recipients were getting some conditional benefits, and these benefits were lower anyway. So the pressure on the basic income recipients resulting from the activation model was definitely less. So if it had any impact, then it means that without the activation model, then the gap would have been greater. And so the impact of the basic income would have been even greater. And so that's the interpretation. And in my view, even in the interpretation by the researchers, there is some confusion about that, and even more, of course, in some of the media coverage. Then your second question is, of course, very very important, and so about the type of jobs in particular. I mean, all this amalgamates self-employment and waged employment, and of course, temporary and permanent employment, and so on. And so when the editor of Social Europe, where I published my piece about that, he put then my title was "Thank You Finland," basic income. Thank you Finland. They didn't like that, and he put and then we agreed on putting Finland's final verdict. And Oli Kangas, who was the head of the research department of Kela, which ran the experiment, reacted by saying, "Thank you, Philippe, but this is not the final verdict, precisely because we need to investigate more closely. For example, the difference between employment, self-employment. So what is defined as a day of employment here is earnings that are at least equal, which are earnings of 23 euros per day or more. And so that extremely casual work that pays 5 euros per day is not counted. So it's days of work that pay at least 23 euros. I don't know why they chose 23 euros, but that was their criteria. But they are going, so Orikanga said they are going to work more on the data precisely in order to answer your question.
Thank you, Philip. Gerda, would you like to continue? After Gerda, I have a few questions also. Gerda?
So, yes.
Okay.
I find this tests very, very interesting. And I find it also interesting to listen to our discussion about it, because it seems like that the main reason for any test or for basic income is to get people to work for somebody. Why should that be the main thing, to get people to look for a job instead of find themselves a team to work with, to be able to do things, to start up things without being burdened by salaries, being able to form cluster companies, why don't we, for example, suggest a test made of a group that have been rejected grants for brilliant ideas? How many ideas have gone down the drain because people didn't have the tools to execute them? We are talking about how many of these people get job for somebody. We never mention anything, the definition of what is work. Can you imagine how many people are making the working people unable to work because they are babysitting for them, they are running errands for them, they're taking care of them, they're jumping in. See, this is a combination of, and work is something totally different. And another thing also, what we are talking about, the cost for the government, this is no cost for the government. The government owes this money, the dividend of our commons, the dividend of our national resources, which they have not paid out. We only get in our arms all the how do you say, the bankrupt companies. We have to pay up their debts, but our dividend is just kept there as a secret. We never look at this money paid out in the basic income monthly payments of our dividend of our properties. This is something that they owe us, but not a cost for them. This is an investment in society, and we have to put much more dignity into that, because it is not special. These people are working for us. They're our employees. They are lucky to have a job, and their job is to take care of our money and distribute them. The economy was started. But the idea of economy in the beginning was to make people and homes able to live jointly from the gifts of nature. And then the greed virus, which is much more dangerous than any coronavirus, just took over the world. And we are welcoming it. We just jump on the train with a bloody greed virus and think, okay, we have our share of the greed and we have to fight for it. This is bullshit, in my beautiful English. But I hope you understand what I mean. I think we should turn around, value work, value initiative, creativity. And why do people not work? They are not lazy. They just are not interested because their candle has not been lit up. They have not been introduced to opportunities. Just like you're invited to a dinner, you're not hungry, and then you find this gorgeous smell, and you just, never have enough. Do you know what I mean? You have to be driven by passion to wanting and doing. And if you don't have any passion, you should you should go and see your doctor. And I can see this in the characteristics of people. If they're interested, you can wake up, you get up in the morning, you stay late up, you have a different energy. And this is the energy that we have to find with the basic income. And don't look at it as cost. It is our property. Thank you.
Yeah, well, as you realize, there is a lot in your intervention and a lot with which I fully agree. And so, but today we need to be focused on this experiment. But what's the relevance of these sort of experiments? We had, I think it was precisely, I think when we had the Bien Congress in Tampere in Finland, there was a panel on the relevance of experiments. Eduardo, you have to mute you. Hello, Eduardo. So there was a panel on the relevance of experiments, and Sarat Davala, when he was the vice chair of Bien, when he was asked, is there anything in an experiment that could show you that a basic income is a bad idea? He said no. He said no, nothing. And so then you may ask, well, what's the point of having experiments then if we know in advance that it is a good idea? But it's in part for the reason you just mentioned. And many of us believe in basic income, in making and not only helping people to get enough food to eat, as our conditional means-tested guaranteed minimum income do, but we also want to make people free. And so to make it less conditional in many ways so that they can have this wider set of choices, as you indicated, not just being employed by working for someone else or working for a capitalist firm, but it's good that they should not be excluded from that, but there are many other choices. Nonetheless, it's very important to have experiments like these in order to lift, to help people think about it, to think about the best way to introduce it, the way of reducing some negative side effects, and in order to help more people to take the idea seriously and see that there is no massive retreat away from the basic income that will be triggered by it. And so that's what, but I fully agree with your central point is that we shouldn't focus in such a narrow way on the impact of whatever change we make in the tax and transfer system on the supply of labor, which is what many people, including some of the people who ran the Finnish experiment, which is what they often focus on far too narrowly. So it's an important point, and of course there are many issues in what you said, which must be discussed in other contexts than this one.
Yes, exactly. But this is also what I find so important, that people understand. It's not enough to say it's your right. It's your right. It doesn't clean. It doesn't have any hold as such. But it is just our property. It is not our right as such, because that's very empty words and people don't link it to anything. But if you link it to that it is the common property that we are asking dividend of, that's a total different thing. And one thing we are doing now here in Iceland, we are getting a working group to evaluate companies, giving them points for who they are, what is their ownership, how are they dividend, what is the scale of the salary scale, the profit, or their right as a company as such, what they do. And then they will be, we have like 10 points from 1 to 10, and then the companies are scaled by those points, like the hotels are 5 points. So this company has 3 points. It's not very interesting. So they have to start to sell themselves to the market also, just like the employees. And we want to talk about all companies as one team, from top to bottom, if we can talk about that, but the whole scale is one team. And I think that this makes people think differently about companies.
That might be interesting to talk about that and in more detail.
Yeah, sure.
Some other people may have questions about the experiment, and given that we have to Finnish people who follow that closely, it's a good opportunity to get more discussion about that.
I would like to have a question. There is nobody raising hands. My question is, In fact, I had been discussing this since the Copenhagen meeting, maybe 3-4 years ago. My understanding is that during the experiments, we have a limited time. And the people who are taking part within the experiment, they do know it, they are aware of it. And also, there are selected people, I mean, a group of people. So you don't have the UBI impact in the society, but you are putting this, you are giving this money to certain people. So I don't think that we can really measure the real positive impact of UBI on people. So I think we should have a kind of correction factor to the results, because the whole society do not feel the UBI habitat, and also people who are taking part in the experiment are aware of that the experiment will be for 2 years or 1 year, whatever. So my point is, these experiments, I feel somehow dangerous. I mean, if the results were not positive, but very slightly negative, then should we start thinking that the experimental results show that UBI is not good? Because we are not really testing the real UBI touch. That's my point. And that's why when I hear a result about an experiment, I'm in tension. Maybe you, Pekka, Osmo, if you would like to comment.
I could respond shortly. This Finnish experiment was good in one way. Those participants were sampled from there. Because if you take volunteers, it's always the most eager group. So we had good sample. But what we didn't have, we had only 2 years. That's too short a time period. For example, getting one's enterprise, one's business going. You don't found a business for 2 years. You need at least 5 years for that to get it really going. And so if we had 5-year experiment, I'm certain more people would have got jobs and more people would have studied and started some businesses.
Yeah. And
yes, may I say also that this is one of the critics I have also said, that if you know that it's only 2 years, no one is going to get up a sheep farm in the eastern Finland and start a totally different life. And also, if you take it more technocratically, you can say that if everyone gets a basic income, the balance in the labor market is different than if only some people get it. And so the effects of 2 years experiments are really limited.
yeah, let me also add, so I fully agree with the importance of that questions and with the elements of the answer that have just been given. So I would quickly go through the various serious limitations of that sort. And first, there's what I mentioned before, which is that not only unemployed people, but as Osmo pointed out, long-term unemployment were involved. So people who had been unemployed for at least 2 years were involved. So the minimum you should do if you want to assess the impact of the measure is to have some workers. Even workers who would gain from it, because you give them a basic income, gain from it, statically speaking, you give them a basic income, you'll have to tax them. You'll have to tax all workers in order to fund it. And that will, as such, already modify the incentive to work, because if you have to tax everyone from the first euro, of course, the incentive to work, even if you keep a basic income, will be reduced. But it's not only that you need to introduce these workers who will be taxed, but you'll have to introduce also a new sample. And of course, you need a random sample, not just volunteers, as well emphasized by Pekka. But you also need to introduce, in principle, people who will lose out as a result of it, people who will be taxed more than the equivalent of their basic income. And that is, of course, you could say, ethically problematic. I think, conflicting with the principle of equality, constitutional principle of equality, established in many countries, where you'll say, well, you can't really tell someone, now you are going to be forced for 2 years to have less in net income than someone else doing the same job and paid the same amount. So you have all these problems about the constitution of your sample, and then the implications if you scale the thing in terms of taxation on everyone. But then there is the question of the duration, because if you know it's only for 2 years, will you work more or less than if you know that it's for the whole of your year, of your life? Will you say this is only for 2 years, so I'm going to take a good holiday? Or are you going to say it's only for 2 years, so I'm certainly not going to give up my job? You don't know. There's an experiment in Kenya going on at the moment, which has a much longer, I think, in the longest version, it would be that people have been told they'll get the basic income for 12 years, I think, or 10 years. So it's certainly much longer than, because it's also much cheaper in Kenya than it would be in Finland. You have those limitations. Then you have the additional limitation mentioned by Ali, that here you have 2,000 people who are spread out on the whole of the territory of Finland. Of course, the impact can also be very different from the impact in the case of what's called the saturation sample, where you give the basic income to every single member of a particular local community. Right? So how there were some studies made about this impact. Uli Kangas once told me that having a saturation sample is no longer possible in the internet era. Why? Because even now a number of beneficiaries of the basic income in Finland started saying on Facebook, oh great, I have been picked. And one of them, I think, said he had been interviewed by 2,000 journalists in the course of the 2 years. If you had the all basic income experiment concentrated on one particular community or a few political communities, municipal communities, where you would have them invaded by journalists, activists, as the little village in Namibia was, where there was some sort of pilot study, not at all as scientific as the Finnish one. And simply because it happens there, then everyone wants to come and see what people, how life is like in a basic income society. And so it would thereby be so disturbed by media interest and activist interest that you couldn't derive anything from the experiment. And most fundamentally, as in fact the main impact on basic income is something that can only be long-term, because it means that as a result of giving more power to the people, they will only accept jobs that give them training, give them further prospects, or are paid very well. And so that means that the long-term, the impact, the real impact on basic income will be an impact on the sorts of jobs that will survive, that will be developed, and that are not viable now, and also on the structure of pay for these various jobs, because the shitty jobs will either have to disappear, being replaced by machines, or have to be improved dramatically in terms of their quality, or be paid more. And so in particular, it should have a massive positive impact on the relative pay of women compared to men by increasing their ability to exit, increasing their bargaining power, and thereby also improving their pay. So for all these effects, and some of which are really central to the case for basic income, many of these effects are really impossible to track in the case of an experiment like this one, which doesn't deprive it of all interest, but certainly limits that interest very much for many reasons, including the several reasons which have been given by Ali in this question.
Thank you, Philip. Leandro, please, Leandro.
From Brazil, right?
Okay, Leandro, you are unmuted.
Hey, Felipe. Hello, everyone. I have a question about experiments in general, because I agree that with Sarah, I was in the panel you mentioned about the experiments, and I agree that it's positive that we have experiments and that we can take advantage of many of them. But I have something that bothers me when it comes to how the experiments are financed. In the case of Finland, it may not apply. This kind of concern might not apply, but since the basic income would have a political community or a community as a reference to be paid, I consider that the resources used to pay it, whether it's permanently or in an experiment, must be negotiated and treated in the political system of that political community. So once we have an experiment such as the Kenya of the Give It Directly experiment that has money coming out from the of the political community in which that beneficiaries are, perhaps we don't have a very important gain, or even we do have something like a slightly negative impact when it comes to how resources are debated and negotiated within a political system. So that's my main concern about the experiments, that might not apply to the Finland experiment, because it was very well debated by elected officials and so on. But once you have something that brings a lot of money from abroad, for example, it might, in my view, be something that has a negative impact, because you don't negotiate anything within those actors, with decision-making people and the constituents of that place. So I had this question in my mind for a very long time, and this is a kind of opportunity, Philippe, to ask you about this. So thank you, and I hope we can talk more about everything that is going on in the future.
Yeah, I can briefly react to that. So it's true that you have these two kinds of experiments, the Finnish experiment being at one extreme, because here it was really the central government that decided to have a nationwide experiment. At the other extreme, you had, for example, the pilot study in Namibia, where it was Lutheran missionaries who managed to get some money, and then for one village managed to more or less precarious way, then it had to be interrupted, started again, etc. You mentioned Give Directly in Kenya. In the Indian experiment that were run by Guy Standing and Sarah Davara and etc. And there it was UNICEF, that was providing money. In all these cases, it's coming from outside. Now, the argument against it, you could say, I understand that, is, well, it's people with big pockets from outside who come and say, look, we are giving these benefits to these people. We chose these people, so it's not democratically chosen. We choose these people, and we give this money. We decide for how long it is going to be, and you have these outside donors who decide for the local population. Local population is happy to accept because it improves their fate for the limited period. There is then a problem of a weaning period afterwards, because it's only for 2 years, and then suddenly you say, now the money is up, but of course all this needs to be weighed against the knowledge which you can acquire in this way. And so, because it's meant, if it's properly done, it's meant as an experiment, it's meant to help us learn about certain things that will then be of benefit for countries that want to introduce something like that, including the country where the experiment is being done, but also for people around the world in order to better inspire policies. So it's it's an important debate, much wider than the basic income experiment. So as you probably know, so the latest Nobel Prize for Economics was given to 3 people, Esther Duflo, her husband, and a third one from Harvard, because they have been doing these randomized experiments, usually funded by either private donors, but generally supranational organizations. And Esther Duflo's argument has always been, yes, okay, the great advantage is that this can happen more quickly because it doesn't go through all the democratic and lobbying, etc. If you needed a political decision. So it can happen, and it can happen more quickly. And the justification for it is the public good it produces in the form of knowledge.
Thank you, Philip. I guess our dear friend Mark would like to contribute regarding the experimental work. Mark, okay, you are here. Oh, Eduardo, I just saw your hand. After Mark, thank you.
Okay, so hello to everybody. I just wanted to say a word about a project that we have in France. Actually, we've been working for several years now with the island of Corsica, with the Assembly of Corsica. And recently, there has been a vote in the Assembly on all political groups agreed to ask for an experiment of a basic income for Corsica. And this project, of course, will be some kind of exception in France. This is an island, and the project is that all people in the island, let's say 300,000 people, would see a basic income, and this would be part of their tax scheme. This, as Leandro said, I mean, we're working very much in order to make a connection between the tax scheme and the basic income. So the basic income can be seen in the tax. And it will be a monthly payment for those who really are below the tax, because we will work on the tax and on the payment. So we expect, we hope that the French government will accept that we build this project for the Corsica island. So Philippe, you have some comment on this? Maybe.
Well, of course, experiments on that size are more instructive, unavoidably, than random sample. This would be a huge saturation sample. And of course, I mean, as you know, I've been following what you are doing with some surprise, I must say, but and some great interest. So we'll see. And the question is, as it was in the Netherlands, where you had a local or regional will to experiment, but then it was in the end blocked at the central level. So obviously, this Corsica and the Corsican Assembly needs to have a go-ahead from the central French government, including then a great degree of precision about the rights of the people who moved to Corsica in the course of the experiment and so on. So you told me that you are optimistic about the go-ahead of the French government, and so I'm going to follow that with great interest. I'm sure we all are going to follow that with great interest. And congratulations on what you've achieved so far.
Thank you, Philip. Sheila, dear Sheila, word is yours.
Thank you. It's very interesting to hear what's happening in France, because we have had for a little while similar kinds of movements in Canada, where Prince Edward Island, which is the same thing, it's a very small province, a very contained population, and they have all party support in that province. They don't have enough of their own tax revenues, however, to do it on their own. They need the federal government's involvement. But what's interesting, I think, there is that they have now moved away from saying we want to be a pilot site. They are saying, start here, just do it, work out the bugs, you know, if there are a few problems here and there, just work them out and then apply it to the rest of the population. They're not calling for an experiment. And on that line, like, we've actually learned a tremendous amount from Canadian policy experience that was never designed as an experiment. It was designed to simply do things. And some of those things resemble basic income in very important ways. And we have decades of that experience that shows exactly the same kinds of patterns that you're seeing universally in all of the pilots around the world. So we think that's very encouraging, and we're starting to get more political support, I think, for understanding that.
Just a quick reaction to that. So in our book on basic income, published a couple of years ago, so we have a longish discussion of experiments, a survey of experiments, and we point out then the various limitations I mentioned before. And so if then some people say, yes, but what are we going to do? Then are we going to jump into the dark and do it immediately? And in fact, our response in the book consists in saying, look, how did we get the two existing components of our social protection system? And we have social assistance, which was born at the beginning of 16th century in a few municipalities. And we have social insurance that was born at the end of 19th century in Bismarck's Germany. How did it start? It started by just doing it. There was no randomized experiment, doing it, but at a very modest level. At a modest level that was nevertheless a bold move, because it was the first time there was public assistance in a few towns in Flanders in Germany at the beginning of the 16th century. It was the first time that was a national pension system, but it was at low levels, modest levels. And then people liked it. And then the French saw that the Germans were doing it. They thought, we are going to do it at a higher level. And then they did it at a high level, and it worked there too, etc. And so I think that maybe Corsica, maybe Canada as a whole. So at some point, you need, because of the awareness of the problem, because of some sort of utopian vision, but nevertheless a realistic vision, you need then politicians that are bold enough, intelligent enough to really grasp the nature of the problems and how this could be part of the solution. And then they just move on by doing it. Precisely because the experience will never tell us, because of their limitation, whether basic income at the level of a living wage is sustainable or not. We'll never know that through an experiment. So let's just move on at a modest level that improves the fate of many people, even at a low level, and of course, without worsening the situation of any of the people in the worst off, among the worst off households. And then let's move on, learn from it. And indeed, there will be bugs, as you say, there will be bugs to mend, but the only way to find out is by doing it cautiously, because you are playing with the social security, with the economic security of many people. So I fully agree with your line. Ali, have we lost our chair? Then?
Oh, thank you, Philip. Janus.
Thank you. Well, Monsieur de Basquiat, I want to tell that I like the idea that if the basic income experience would happen in such a particular place like the island of Corsica, when we in Estonia collected the signatures to one petition, there was proposed that if any experience will be in Estonia, then the best place would be the two biggest islands. I hope you good luck. But I wanted to ask something. Can we find details somewhere, the details of your possible basic income schema with the possible tax schema? Thank you.
It's a question for Mark. And
yes, I can answer this. So if you go to the basic income website, so I push with the help of Malcolm. Actually, I put an article on this article about the Corsica story. There is a report attached, and it is in English. So I translated it in English, and it explains how it works with some details. So don't hesitate to send me an email, so I will give you more information if you want. But you can get this report online on the basic income site.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sorry, Eduardo. I was following the chat box and the participants list as well. Eduardo, you are unmuted. Maybe after Eduardo, maybe Philip.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Yes. Well, Ali, Mutlu, and Philip Vamparis, and all of you, I would like to tell you I've made an important decision, a political, personal decision that I was thinking about since our meeting in Hyderabad in India, where I exchanged ideas with what to do with Philip Vamparis, Guy Stanning, Carl Weiderkist, and others, and Monica Dallari, my girlfriend that was with me, whether should I be a candidate for mayor of São Paulo. There will be elections in principle in the first Sunday of October. Perhaps it will be postponed a while for November or December, depending on how long it will take the pandemic of the coronavirus. But yesterday, I decided not to be a mayor candidate anymore of São Paulo in order to dedicate my life, my fully life and energy for the institution of a citizen's basic income in Brazil and all over the world. It was an important decision, personal, but and I told that in a debate with 6 other candidates, and I expressed my contentment that I was happy because all of them said that they will fight for the citizens' basic income. They have embraced the proposal, especially because since the first day of our about 15 debates, I have always argued how the basic income will be so important. So during the last 40 days, I had about 62 live meetings, such as this one, always about the citizens' basic income, with more than, perhaps 50 different cities of São Paulo, more than 11 of the 27 states. And all of them, when I finished about 1 hour or even more, they said, well, once this coronavirus pandemic passed, we want you to be here. So in order to attend all these invitations, I decided not to be a São Paulo mayor candidate again, but the struggle is going on. And I would like to tell you a little bit about the experience of a citizen's basic income that is happening in Maricá, in a city in the coast of the state of Rio de Janeiro, that is governed by the Workers' Party. The mayor, Washington Kwakwa, has started several innovations, such as the foundation. He was elected in 2008, and then he started first with a community bank and a social money called Mumbuca. Each Mumbuca is R$1, the Brazilian money, in order to give incentives for the local economy, since all kinds of income transfers started to be paid in Mumbucas. And but since in Maricá they had the money from Petróleo, the Petrobras, who has a base in front of Maricá, they have for example, comparing to the average income per capita of São Paulo, they have at least 3 times more. And so they were able to realize several investments to improve the schooling system very much, starting new schools. They started this community bank that provided microcredit, especially for micro entrepreneurships, but mainly also giving incentives to cooperatives, and they started a new modern hospital that was inaugurated last week, so-called Ernesto Che Guevara, with very important at this moment because of the coronavirus, and that will attend people not only from Maricá, but from the neighboring cities. And they have made several, they have also 14 bus lines with zero tariff. And so they have so many initiatives. And it was in December 2015, in a conference about human rights, I explained the advantages of the basic income. And the mayor, Washington Kwakwa, said, I want to make it a basic income in Maricá. And so he proposed to the city council, and it was approved December 2015 at a very modest level, 10 Mumbucas per month in 2016, plus the Bolsa Vermelha program, 20 Mumbucas per month in 2017. But in December 2019, this is a city of 162 inhabitants. All families, all people who are in families earning up to 3 minimum wages per month, they started to receive 130 Mumbucas as a basic income. And this means 42,000 people, 1/4 of the present population. Now, from April 1, is not 130 Mumbucas, now is 300 Mumbucas. By the end of 2020, half of the population, that means 81,000 or more, will be receiving the basic income. And by 2024, when it will finish the next period of the Workers' Party mayor, now is another one, is the Fabiano Horta, that succeeded Washington Quaqua, both of the Workers' Party. And so by 2024, the whole city, all inhabitants, more than 162,000 at that time, will be receiving the unconditional basic income. And there is, well, the Jane Family Institute, who is also doing research about Stockton and other places. They came to Brazil to study carefully the results of this very innovative basic income experience. And let me just tell you that after, well, with this pandemic of the coronavirus, there was a tremendous interest in the basic income proposal, and the National Congress 3 weeks ago approved a new law that was sanctioned by President Jair Bolsonaro. All families receiving up to 3 minimum wages, 3,135, well, about 3,000 reais per month. All of those families, the adults with 18 years or more, are receiving now 600 reais per month. This will be for 3 months, but might be prorogated for 3 or more months with the pandemic if it continues. And of course, it will continue for several months. And now, so probably there are already more than 35, perhaps 50 million Brazilians who started to receive last April and May 600 reais per month. And so this is more than $100 per month. And this will be, and there is a
Eduardo, the line is broken, I guess.
But the discussion has increased a lot, and that's why I would like to tell you, also here in Brazil, the concept of a citizen's basic income, unconditional and universal, is getting stronger and stronger. That's my message. Congratulations to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Friends are congratulating you. Anybody else who would like to say anything about? So we can finish our discussions regarding the experimental part. Philip, would you like to say any last words about these discussions? I mean, Eduardo's good news are also.
Yeah, just a small question to Eduardo in the case of the Marica experiment. If you, it's really the introduction of a mother's basic income there. So I was checking on Wikipedia here at the same time. So it says on Wikipedia that the population of Marica is about 150,000 people, but from the data you mentioned before, it seemed to me that it's
162,000 is the last figure.
Okay, and these people,
the present figure,
and that includes this includes the children, huh? So
yes, yes, and as of now, 42,000 people, all of them that are in families with income per capita, with income up to 3 minimum wages, more than 3,200 reais per month, they are receiving the 300 Mombucas or reais per month as of now in May.
Okay, and could you give an idea then of the amount the basic income would come to in 2024? So at the end of the period, expressed in dollars, how high would that be, more or less?
Well, right now is 300 Mombucas per month, and it was 130 in December, so they have increased significantly, and I don't know exactly, at least 300 Mombucas per month, but it might increase. Of course, this will depend on the oil revenue for Maricá and the world. It will depend also on the price of oil, but anyway, they are very enthusiastic about the basic income in Maricá, and the effects are quite positive. In the mayor of Maricá told me recently that in Maricá, the extreme poverty has been extinguished. And also, since they started the basic income program, differently from other cities in the state of Rio de Janeiro where unemployment has increased, in Maricá, every month by month, the number of workers being employed has increased every month.
Okay, but anyway, so it's also something that will need to be followed. And if I know there is a scientific committee that follows the experiment, also with Fabio Wattenberg and other people, and it will certainly be useful for the whole of the network if some short description of the experiment could be provided, and including the equivalent in dollars, so what the local currency translated into dollars to have a picture. Then Ali, just to close.
May I thank you very much, Philip, for our conversations in Hyderabad with Monica and Guy Standing that made me think a lot about dedicating myself completely to the basic income cause, because I always, well, I am more and more persuaded every day that how good it is, the basic income purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you for your relentless energy up to, no doubt, your last breath, and an example for all of us. Then just to close this part of the session on the experiment, so I think we need to thank Finland, the people who put effort into the experiment, the people who prepared the ground for it, because it was a right-of-center government that introduced it, but it was the Left Alliance and the Green Party that were in the opposition in this period that had done most in order to create pressure in that direction and to help make that take that idea seriously. There are lots of plans for experiments throughout the world. I think they need to be welcomed, if only because of the fantastic publicity that create around the idea of basic income. But at the same time, and that's why I found it so important also to react straight away, so in order to interpret properly the result. At the same time, we must emphasize the limits of these experiments, and in particular, as well, was well put by several of you earlier, the fact that the rightness or wrongness of basic income does not hinge on the short-term impact on the labor supply of the people. And the impact can be negative in the immediate sense on the labor supply, but of course basic income is something that aims at a deeper transformation of the economy. to make it more sane, more resilient, and at the same time it aims at social justice, and social justice means giving more freedom to do also other things than work, but also not to be excluded from work to the people with least of that freedom. And so it's really very important both to have your nose on reality and learn from reality, including through these experiments, but not only through these experiments, and at the same time not lose sight of the big picture. And so I'm very glad to have to see and also the potential fruitfulness of initiatives like Ali's initiative to get people from around the world. There's something I find that makes me emotional about the fact that people in so many countries here can talk together thanks to a common lingua franca, but also thanks to the contemporary media, the technology that's available, also cheaply available, and then above all, thanks to the energy of the people who really believe of it, like Eduardo, like Ali, like so many around this virtual table. So thank you very much.
Philip, thank you very much. And dear Pekka and dear Osmo, it was very beneficial, I guess.
Yeah, that was great to have them there.
Yeah, we are recording all this and we are sharing it in YouTube after a process. Within 2 days, I guess it will be ready. Dear friends, maybe we can continue with our working groups. And I know Hilda is here. Maybe she can mention about working group number 1. We can say a few things about working group number 10. And also, maybe we would like to hear Mike Danson once again, because he gave some information at the very beginning of the meeting, but after that time, many friends joined. So if he kindly accepts, he may repeat it. Hilda, can we continue with working group number 1? What's ongoing?
I'll have to go at this point to my next commitment. So thank you very much, Ali, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Osmo.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Philip. Philip, my regards to Sue, and thank you all. And it's important that Leandro Ferreira is also participating in this meeting. And so we are quite optimistic that the struggle is going on with positive steps. Thanks to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oi, filho. Foi a minha despedida.
Hilda.
Shall I share some nice news from the United Nations? As some of you may already be aware, is that, oh, sorry, I'll just start to share my screen, is that a few days before we sent the letter to the Secretary General, there was a report published. Oh, I cannot share my screen, but there was a report published. It was called The Framework of Immediate Socio-Economic Response of COVID-19, published by the United Nations.
Hilda, can you try once again?
It's a report called The Framework. I put it on the chat. It's the first message in the chat with a link to it. It's called The Framework for Immediate Socio-Economic Response to COVID-19, published by the United Nations. And the UNDP, so the United Nations Development Programme, is assigned to execute that framework, which is why we sent the covering letter. That was initially we planned to send the covering letter to Kadi Wignaraya, if I pronounce her name right, who is the assistant administrator of the UNDP. But because of this framework, we decided to send it to Mr. Achim Steiner as well, who is the big boss of the UNDP. And the interesting thing of that framework is that, to my knowledge, it may even be the first time, but is that basic income is mentioned in relation to the human rights. And it's only one very short sentence in the report on page 44 in an annex. it says that the provision of basic income should include workers and migrants in the informal economy. So that is good news. Then when we send the letter, which was sent on May 2nd, 4 days after that, Kani Vignaraya, so the UNDP assistant administrator, had an interview on the site of the United Nations. I will share the link soon. And she says, millions and millions of people are now out of a job. A huge proportion of people work in the informal sector without a contract, insurance, or any kind of job security. Add the displaced persons, refugees, and undocumented people who were never part of any formal system to begin with. This is why for UNDP, it is so essential to bring back a conversation about universal basic income and to make it a central part of the fiscal stimulus packages that countries are planning for. I will share the link. Of course, it would be really nice to think that this was that our letter had contributed to this interview. I don't think it has, but it is a movement of within the United Nations. It's like an oil tanker, but they explicitly mention refugees, undocumented people, human rights. So I think within the United Nations, it is becoming more and more, people become more and more confident to openly express their endorsement for basic income. And as I understand from people within the United Nations, it is quite a bit of a taboo topic. So, so yes, so let's wait for the Secretary General to, to react to the letter. We will have to be a little bit more patient. I do receive emails from people that if we can share the letter online, we do have to be a little bit more patient because we agreed to give the Secretary General a chance to react. And we did actually ask, to set up an advisory board and to set up even a global wealth fund. So we really asked them for actions. So I think we should give them an opportunity to actually react. So I think if I look at Diana, it's about 2-3 more weeks before we can send a reminder.
Hi everyone, thanks Hilde. Yes, I would say to give them more time. I think like the timing is really, really great. It's on our side, and the fact that we sent this letter by coincidence 3-4 days before there was this other article which Hilde just mentioned is really a very good sign for us. So I would advise as a former staff in that huge building to wait a bit longer and really see what comes out of New York in response to these two letters. I think doing something ahead of that, going public, or maybe the first step, as Guy also advised, would be a reminder. Going public might be perceived as a threat, as more pressure, as Guy also said 2 weeks ago. So I think let's avoid shooting ourselves in the foot and wait this one out a bit longer. But the momentum is there, like the pressure is there, beyond us. It's there from the events. It's there because of the mentions of basic income, through Google searches. So the pressure is on. So let's wait and see. I would advise.
So that was the news from the UN perspective. Then last Friday we had a meeting with a small group to discuss about the letter to the spiritual leaders and key persons for the religions that have no leaders. We discussed about first we had to decide if we would write separate letters to separate leaders or one general letter to everyone. we decided the letter to have one letter that can be sent to every single spiritual leader, key person, globally as well as nationally as well as regionally. The letter will be very short because we wanted to send the letter that we wrote to the Secretary General as an addendum to the letter to spiritual leaders. I think it was drafted already by Paul and Malcolm and Anna. Do you want to share it, Paul, already, or shall we, because we are going to discuss it next week?
No, it's boring. It just says, here's a letter, basically.
Here's a letter, yeah, practice your faith.
A bit more diplomatic than that. But it's very simple. I don't, you know, it was as short as possible.
Yeah, so the biggest challenge will be to find, you know, enough names and email addresses and things like that to actually get the letters to the places where we want them to go. So that's all for now.
Thank you, Hilde. Dear friends, any question? Peter Knight? I thought, okay. So no questions about these activities. Thank you very much. It was very beneficial. And for the good news, thank you for the good news. Dear friends, let's continue with, as far as I know, we are here from working group number 10. Annie is here and I'm here. Mark is here. Okay, that's all, I guess. Annie, would you like to brief, or maybe if you start, then I can continue if you like, about the working group number 10, the survey.
Yes, this is a working group which is trying to conduct a survey, first of all, to see how many governments have introduced economic measures which they call a basic income, and then to find out if they actually are. And the purpose of this is to try to protect the integrity of the term basic income, and also to stop people, basic income advocates, being charged with claiming things that they are not charged with, that they're not claiming. And so we're starting off trying to develop a questionnaire, and the idea is to present it to the people from the Biang affiliates around the world, to get them to respond with the economic measures that their governments are taking on. But since we're doing this survey, we're adding some other objectives. One is to see what, we claim that we have a duty not just to advocate basic income, but to ensure that public services are maintained or improved as well. And so we want to find out what other public services are available in each country, and particularly to see whether the amounts that are given are sustainable given the other public welfare services that are available. And it's still early stages. We only started on Friday, and we're just trying to get the questionnaire together. And we have to also decide how we're going to analyse it or use it, because it's no good just collecting a whole lot of information that we don't know what we're going to do with in the end. I think that's all I can say to summarise, but Ali, you may want to add a bit more.
Dear friends, thank you, Annie. Thank you very much. Dear friends, the survey, the target of the survey is to collect quantitative data and to make comparisons and to prepare some visuals, graphs, that kind of stuff. So it will be more easy to understand the case in the world. But you see, within the questions of the first draft, which was from early April, there were two kinds of questions. One kind of question was for collecting factual data. The other one was asking for the opinions of the people who are filling the survey. So we separated into two. There will be two studies. One study will collect factual data, but the other study will be for the opinions of the people. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. Still, I mean, it's in draft. I just reply all to the previous mail, but there the UBI advocates at googlegroups.com were there also. So we shared with all of you the draft of the questions regarding the opinions. But anyhow, it will be finished in the coming days. So we will have two sets of questions. One set is for the opinions of the people. The second set is in order to collect factual data. This is all I can say at the moment. When they are ready, of course, we will share with you. But I saw Telemak. Telemak, are you here?
Yes, I am. I am. I was very impressed by Annie's, skills at synthesizing everything we've said. I guess the only little thing, but it's more a clarification of something she already said, is that it would be a good occasion to collect more information about the way that each Bien affiliate and other activist network define basic income, and maybe a way to also encourage networks to see and to develop in a way the way they perceive the integration of the basic income policies they fight for within the broader say existing social protection system, which I guess it also comes. I was taken by another meeting before, so I arrived a bit late to the conversation about the experiment and with Philippe and the Finnish report. But I guess we are all currently realizing this more and more, I guess, in our local struggles, and with the great surge in interest with the COVID-19 crisis, that the real question of basic income activism now, when it comes to implementation, is really the question of how you manage the integration within the existing social system, and you make sure that this integration is a chance for the maybe less fortunate in our society. So I guess we both a way to, as you were saying, opinions and questions, which maybe those questions can be helpful for each networks to reflect upon their own advocacy strategies and learn from the experiences of other networks. I guess that was what came from the meeting. But again, that is less synthetic than Annie's presentation, so I apologize for this. Sorry.
Thank you, Telemak. Because your name is written as Jackie Etnos, I couldn't see you when you close your camera. Mark, would you like to add anything about that working group? Mark? No, okay. So this is the summary of the working group number 10. We will have another working group meeting during this Friday, if I'm not mistaken. And hopefully it will be ready in the coming days. Is there any other working group who would like to give a brief, not report, but brief information about what they are doing? If not, maybe we can listen, dear Mike, once again. Thanks, Annie, for the introduction. But Mike, would you like to repeat your contribution once again, which you did at the very beginning?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, if you missed me at the start, I'm the chair of Citizens Basic Income Network Scotland, and work closely with Annie on Basic Income Scotland, and we're also both on the local organising committee for the BN Congress for next year. Briefly to update, if you didn't know, the venue in Australia, the organisers decided they sensibly cannot go ahead this year with a Congress because of the coronavirus crisis, and they don't feel they're in a position to be able to run it next year. We're exploring with them whether we could have a virtual Congress this autumn, and Jamie Cook, many of you know, is looking to carry that forward. What we have agreed to do is in Scotland, we'll host the 2021 BN Congress. We hope there will be a physical element to that, but that's still unclear, given international travel and problems and so on. We will definitely have a virtual Congress next autumn, late August, early September. We will have a parallel community events and engagement, and also we would hope to be able to welcome at least some people to Glasgow to have a physical presence there as well. It's a very exciting time in Scotland. The Scottish Government, the First Minister, said on a number of occasions now that she now supports fully a basic income in Scotland. Two of the other main parties are similarly fully behind the proposals. The feasibility study that's been ongoing for the last 18 months, the final version should be published in the very near future, and that again will argue for a basic income experiment, at least in Scotland. However, and we'll explore this over the coming months, and at the Congress, Scotland can't really go ahead when it's part of the UK because of we don't have all the powers of Social Security. So we're looking forward to being able to arrange an event next year, virtually anyway, but hopefully also physically, with help of our friends and colleagues from around the world. Annie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. No, happy enough. Okay. Obviously, we'll be in touch and get communications over the coming months, but any questions, very happy to answer any of them at this stage.
Dear friends, any questions to our dear friend Mike? There isn't any question, I guess. Okay. So, any other working groups who would like to give brief information about what they are doing? So, okay. So, dear friends, it's about it took about 2 hours up to now. If you like, we have time. I say we better hear everybody at least once. For example, Ingun, would you like to contribute or would you like to say anything? Dear Ingun? Ingun? Okay. Eduardo, Peter Knight. Peter, would you like to say anything? You are unmuted.
I don't have anything to add. I think the Maricá experiment was explained in detail, and Eduardo covered Brazil, and most people know that there's a debate going on about in the United States Congress about the next round of coronavirus support, and it includes several proposals for a couple $1,000s a month for a period of years. Well, it remains to be seen how this fares, but even Nancy Pelosi has expressed some interest in it. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Peter. Any other friends? Ulrike, would you like to say anything? You are unmuted.
Yes, thank you. No, I don't have to add anything, but I like to join and to get the new information today, and I think the discussion was very interesting. Thank you all. And thank you, Ali, for the organization.
Thank you, Ulrike. Mark, dear Mark, I guess you would like to say something, dear Mark.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. Just one thing. In France, actually, the work what we are doing is very much targeting on the tax questions. So for the social system, there's been a lot of work done by the government, by many organizations, by many governmental organizations about the social systems. On the issues of the system are well known. In the government, I go in several ministries, I see many people, all of them know that the social system in France is really a big issue. And now we're working a lot with the finance government in order to have a reform of the finance of the tax system, in order to put a basic income in the tax system. And currently, this idea is gaining a lot of momentum. We signed a large article in the press last week, and with many parliamentaries, and they are working on that. They constituted a group of parliamentaries in the assembly, more or less are they are at the center of the political party, but not the far right, nor far left. They are really at the center, and we're working with these people. So they build a project that will be basic income integrated in a tax reform. And this idea is gaining a lot of momentum right now, just to give this testimony.
Thank you, Mark. Dear friends, let me say a few things about what's ongoing in Turkey. In the media, many people started writing about this, but they don't know what it is really, and they are using the terminology, but they are trying to figure out what it is. But we will have a national congress next Saturday. It will be 9 sessions. It will be through Zoom, and all sessions will have a separate topic. We will try to make discussions. One topic will be from the media point of view. The other one is politicians' point of view. The other one is business environment point of view. The other one is workers' point of view. The other one is belief point of view, and one more economy point of view, academicians' point of view, and the last one is non-governmental organizations' point of view. There will be 9 sessions, each 1 hour, starting from 11 a.m. in the morning, and it will finish about 8 p.m. I would like to share in the email group also the link. If you would like to just have a look, please join. That was the information what's ongoing in Turkey. So, Ingun.
Yeah, thank you. I was just muted the last time I tried. I was just thinking about the working groups that maybe we should help Ali, so you don't have to do the updating yourself. And maybe like if we give ourselves 3 days that all the group leaders update the topics of their group, so you can see which groups are active, because it'll be, since there are more than 20 groups, it will be quite a job if you have to do the updating yourself. So I thought maybe if we give ourselves 3 days to the 15th of May, and then we have an updated document of the working groups until the next time we meet in 1 week from now.
It will be great. I mean, really, because the idea was the people or the friend who made the proposition should also lead the group and should also give brief information during the weekly meetings. But sometimes it's not the case. So how we can proceed? I couldn't get the mechanism. I mean, how we can collect.
Yes, so if you share the link to the document as it is, then everybody who has can update in 3 days, and then we have an updated document until the next meeting in 1 week from now. So you don't have to do all the work, because that will be very much, and you're quite.
Okay. In fact, you all have the previous version, the Word document. You want me to make it as a Google Doc? Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I will do it. Very, very good idea. Thank you.
Yes.
Sheila, please. Dear Sheila. Okay.
Thank you, Ali. And thank you just generally for organizing all of us. I think this is just an amazing forum, and I think you do an amazing job, and it's good that people are coming forward with ways to help you. I just want to say again, if you can, just very quickly, if you can connect me directly with Marc de Basquiat from France, that we're working in a very, very similar way within the tax system, and I think there's some interesting exchanges we can have, and we have material that's disponible en français aussi. So.
Okay, I will write a mail with both your emails. He should be there, but maybe he's not near his laptop at the moment. I will do it. Thank you, Sheila. And Peter, 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 you have two connections, I guess. So we can hear you, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, hi. Just wanted to do a brief update. I have found an illustrator. I'm very pleased with Sam. He's a basic income supporter. Love his artwork. So hopefully next week we'll have some of his work available for viewing. So far, we're looking at eight pictures. We'll have it on a site, so it'd have to be linked, but it should work. I've dropped the two pictures that I described last week on Donald Trump. That may have been a little bit controversial. It would be something that I'd like to discuss with people, though. The carbon tax and dividend scheme that I've been quoting is something that was put on Donald Trump's desk 3 years ago by the Republican Congress. So it's a Republican plan, which I'm entirely in agreement with. To me, it supported the 70% of the lowest income people in the States. It increased the cost of carbon. It moved people towards greener alternatives. And I think when we're putting a basic income in place, there's going to be money that is getting spent, additional money in the economy. And it would be good if we put things in place that convince people that spending the money in a green way it will alleviate the problem that we'll have from more money being spent and more things being produced if we can direct people towards a greener future. So to me, the carbon tax and dividend makes sense, or is most beneficial to the planet and therefore us, if we have that in place with the UBI. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I've borrowed that policy in the same way as I've borrowed, or I'm forwarding someone else's policy with the VAT. So this I heard about 30 years ago, and spent some time looking at, and I couldn't fault it. I'm an accountant, and I could see how it worked 30 years ago. I didn't think we were in the right time for it. I definitely think we're in the right time for it now. So I heard about that in Greece from an Englishman who told me that the British Labour Party was looking at it seriously. This is in Thatcher's day, I suppose, in the early 70s. I know, in the mid 70s. Their concept was, let's get rid of income tax, pretty much all income tax, raise the VAT rate, and give everybody a basic income. Now, this is the same thing that I suggest to the New Zealand government. They brought Guy Standing in after I produced that letter. This isn't my idea. I'm just entirely in agreement with it. The My UBI site that I produced that describes this checked out 3 different income tax models and 2 VAT models. And I sent it out to the population of New Zealand and said, look, answer these questions and I'll tell you how you will be affected by each of these models. Now, all of that's described in the paper that I've linked to, like, for instance, the USA letter. So that's in the implementation of basic income paper. Now that specifies, it tells you that the best results, in terms of the best results, 1% of the people were better off with a flat income tax. 75% of people were better off with a lowering of the income tax and an increase in the VAT. 50% were advantaged by a basic income, funded by a flat income tax, which means 50% of the voters were disadvantaged. 94% of people were better off with a VAT-funded UBI and a reduction of income tax. Now, please read the paper. It's disheartening to me to have done this work and paid the cost for having done it, and then hear people forwarding ideas and for funding a UBI. You know, I stare at it and I go, gosh, you know, that to me this is logically going to affect middle class working people when you have a look, I'm trying to be diplomatic in amongst this there, but look, at the end, if you're reading the letters that go to the Europeans, it doesn't have the link to that paper. It goes to everybody else. There's a European paper that I did. Philippe recommended me to the Freiburg University, and it was 6 months' work. I presented a paper that showed it was in support of Philippe's work, but to me, my basis of this is the English model that I heard about 30 years ago. So they have a link to the European paper that explains this, but it doesn't really get into the MyUBI website. Now, I offered that to the people there, and I says, look, you really should do this. And if you've got people in your countries looking at how to fund a UBI and they're not doing comparative modelling, they're not doing their job. They're working blindfolded. I don't understand how they can't do this. They've got nothing to base their ideas on. So there's a graph you can get in each country that I've investigated that shows the income levels for each person, what percentage of people make 10,000 a year, what percentage of people make 20,000 a year. And it's really easy. It's like 2 or 3 days work to throw 5 or 6 different income tax models at the data and see who gets affected most. What percentage of people are better off under each model? Why wouldn't you do that? This is taking the blindfolds off. So, sorry. Please, if you get the chance, if you have an opportunity, read the paper. It's linked in the letters. So yeah, just wanted to clarify. Look, I'm not trying to push my own ideas here. These are ideas that I've picked up, and I just entirely agree with. Put a lot of time working on it. So that's where we're up to. The illustrations should be coming out next week with a bit of luck, and we'll see if there's any comments that I can actually get off people or any input into this. Would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Paul, dear Paul.
Okay. Carbon tax. I agree with carbon tax. My approach to carbon tax is it's an international problem. You need an international carbon tax. I said this last year at the conference in India. If you go along with the Republican Party's stance on carbon tax, that means that one of the richest countries in the world is going to tax the carbon, hopefully give it back to its own population as a basic income. And to me, that is not climate justice. A carbon tax should be international. Secondly, you also have to be really careful with what's going on in the United States, because you've got a polarization of Republicans supporting carbon tax and Democrats supporting a Green New Deal or something akin to that, as though you can't have both. So I do agree with you, Peter, that carbon tax is a good idea, but I really don't think it's a good idea to have it on a country-by-country basis. That means the richest countries in the world, the ones that are polluting the most, are going to give more to their citizens, and the poorest countries in the world are going to give much less to their citizens. And to me, that is not climate justice. I had to say that. I've said it before, but that's my problem with carbon tax. And the way it's resolved is to do it internationally. Okay.
Thank you, Paul. Peter Knight, dear Peter.
Well, I just wanted first on the carbon tax and dividend. There's at least one Democrat that's come out in favor of it. He quit the campaign, but he's still very much alive on CNN and elsewhere, and that's Andrew Yang. As for making it international, it's a little hard at the starting point to do that. The Alaskans didn't do it. The Marikas not doing it, and it's hard to get any country to do it until enough of them have done it that it then may be possible to internationalize. And furthermore, what's the legislative body to do it internationally? The other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to say is that there are a number of candidates in the United States at various levels of the political system running on the UBI and Humanity Forward platform. For the Senate in Kentucky, for congressional seats in Oregon, to states, legislatures in South Carolina, and many more. And they are being interviewed by the various YouTubers that are part of the, well, they were the Yang Gang YouTubers on the whole, but a number of them have taken up the business of giving these people a national and international platform. So I'll be happy to send the links to some of these interviews with people at the lower levels of government, because it's an important thing. Even if you can get a president who will advocate for it or runs on the platform, you still got to get it through the legislatures. So the idea of building up legislative support at various levels of a federal system is a very positive thing. I'm sure in Brazil, the same thing holds. Maybe Eduardo would second that. So.
Thank you, Peter. I guess Paul Harnett would like to add something. You, Paul?
Sure. Just on this carbon tax issue, it's not just the Republican Party, the GOP, supporting it broadly. The other major institutions supporting it are the fossil fuel industry themselves. Okay? That's really what should make us all suspicious. And I suspect it's because there'll be ways and means of avoiding it. They'll shift their headquarters from one country to the other. God knows what they'll do. But, you know, be very, very careful with it. I take all your points, Peter, you know, what's the international body, etc., etc. All I'm saying is it's something to be pretty careful about. But the actual premise behind it all of fee and dividend, definitely.
Eduardo, would you like to say something?
Well,
I saw your hands, please.
Peter Knight made the reference to me, but I couldn't get exactly what is the point that he would like me to comment. Please, would you repeat that part, please?
Peter?
I asked if Eduardo agreed that federal systems, that having people run on a UBI platform amongst other elements of what we call Humanity First in the US is a good idea in order to build support within the legislature, so that if any presidential candidate ever comes up with it, that there'll be some support for it within the legislatures.
Well, I think that there are many people, both in the Brazilian House of Representatives as well as in the Senate that are in favor of a basic income. And more nowadays, after the proposition of a extraordinary auxilium that has been approved by unanimity by both houses. And so there are some senators and federal deputies that are very much in favor of a basic income and would like to have more and more discussions. I have just been invited by one of the Brazilian senators to have a dialogue with him and Monica de Boll tomorrow. Monica de Boll is a Brazilian professor at the Johns Hopkins University, and she has participated in several debates about basic income recently, including in the Instituto Fernando Henrique Cardoso in a live conversation. This was last week. So yes, there are many people who are talking about the basic income, and I don't know if perhaps you have seen today. Do you have the Folha de São Paulo of today?
No, but I'll check. I have the global in Rio.
Let me show you. On the third page of Folha de São Paulo today, the revocation of the mandate and the basic income.
Wow.
Where I tell that when I was a senator, I have presented a proposal for the recall system. And there is, in the present trend of more and more criticism about the attitudes of Jair Bolsonaro, the president, this might be an important tool, but it has not been approved, the recall system. And then I said that about the basic income, that the President Jair Bolsonaro, when elected, he said, I swear before God and the Brazilian people that I will respect and obey the Brazilian Constitution. And in this article, I say that the Article 3 of the third article of the Brazilian Constitution says that the fundamental objectives of the Public Federative of Brazil are to build a free, just, and solidarity society, guarantee the national development, eradicate poverty, marginalization, and to reduce the social inequalities and regional inequalities, promote the well-being of everyone without any preconcept of origin, race, sex, color, age, and any other kind of discrimination. And I also tell that in his program that was handed into the Electoral Supreme Court, Jair Bolsonaro said that he will provide a minimum income to all Brazilian families, according to the thoughts of the liberal thinkers, such as Milton Friedman. And then I comment that in my book, The Citizen's Income, The Exit is Through the Door, in the 7th edition, there is here I have an interview with James Tobin, Amartya Sen, and Milton Friedman, 3 Nobel Prize economists. And at a certain point, I asked, this was in the year 2000. He answered to me by email, how do you evaluate the proposition of a citizen's basic income compared to the alternative of a negative income tax? And Milton Friedman's answers, a basic income or a citizen's income is not an alternative to the negative income tax. Is simply another form of introducing a negative income accompanied by a positive income tax without exemption. That and Philippe Vamparis comments the following. This is an affirmation, this is a very clear affirmative that of the equivalence, the formal equivalence of the 2 schemes, which means that Milton Friedman is in favor both of one proposal as well as of the other. And so I conclude my article that if Jair Bolsonaro really wants to follow what he swore, well, his commitment to obey the Constitution, and if he really wants to obey his proposal before being elected, then he should apply the basic income. And I also comment that the big, so many people on the line to get the 600 reais benefit, extraordinary benefit now, if he really wants to solve the problems of the line, he should follow the example of the Alaska Permanent Fund that provides to each one by electronic transfer to his or her account or by check sent to the resident. So it's a proposal for him to obey the Constitution and what he told the people in order to be elected. Okay, what do you think about that, Peter? Please read Folha de São Paulo today, okay? In this beautiful beach that I can see.
It's empty. There's nobody on it because of COVID-19, but I still paddle my board in the morning at 6 o'clock.
Right.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Peter. I guess Peter, 1 second. Okay, Peter would like to say something else? Or it was from the previous?
I need to leave now the meeting. Thank you very much for all, Ali and all the others.
Eduardo, we are having difficulties to reach you with email.
Pardon?
We are having difficulties to reach you by email.
Well,
which one are you using?
Suplicy.
Okay.
And that dot, arroba, no? And then S as in saint, T as in Tom, I as in island, dot.
Oh, I get it. I get it. I know the rest. Okay, this is the correct one.
This is the new one. Yeah.
This is at home.
Oh yeah.
Peter Knight has my. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo. I got it. Thank you. Peter, would you like to add anything else regarding these discussions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Eduardo. Yeah, Paul, I'm trying to remember what was going on with that conversation, but we've got another one going with Jackie as well. Hey, so the flat tax is the Opportunities Party's new plan in here, he emailed me and asked me what I thought about it. I says, look, it's the worst one I modelled. And it's the one he went with. So the Opportunities Parties has gone with exactly this. And the economists, they think, oh, it's marvellous. It's the most simple thing we can do. And they're saying, oh, it's progressive because you've got the UBI going to the poorest. So therefore they're... But if you look at the numbers and figure out where the dividing line is, you'll find that it's in the working middle class that are being taxed. The Opportunities Party policy has some mitigating factors in it. So they have a wealth tax, which is pretty much targeting anybody that owns their own house, and they have. There was another policy in there so as well. So it's a little bit what else is going on in amongst the policies. But personally, I like having the one tax, but I like it for the rich people. So an income tax for anyone earning over 60,000 euros, to me makes sense. An increase in the VAT, so all the lower income earners don't pay any income tax. It's all paid on the VAT. And that's the one that gives the best results for the largest number of people. If you want to do a policy, the way I did mine was I made sure that the worst off aren't worse off, and then I try to get as many people getting a benefit out of it, net of the funding. So if that's what I would do if I was doing it. I don't know if other people would agree with that. The carbon tax and dividend, Paul, it doesn't make a difference where the oil companies set their head office. There's no escaping it. It's at the pump. As soon as you have a carbon tax implemented, everybody's paying it, no matter what the fuel companies do. You do it every time you fill up your car. So once it's there, it's definitely there. The fuel companies support for it. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they figure they have to do something, and it's better than them getting everybody else to pay at the pump than them having to pay the carbon damage that they're doing. So maybe they're looking and going like, oh gosh, maybe it'll turn out like the cigarettes and we're just going to get litigated out of business. So maybe they're looking at it in terms of like, it's better off if people pay at the pump than us having to pay the damages that we've done to the planet. So maybe that's where the support's coming from. So the carbon tax and dividend, yeah, to me it makes sense. That's what I've got to say anyway. Thanks, guys.
Peter, I'm sorry I couldn't hear your last words, but it was a question, or it's finished, I guess. I mean, of course, we will continue in the coming meetings, but if the discussion about Peter's words are finished, let's continue with, we have 5 friends we didn't hear today. Ian, Shabana, John Mills, Paul, and Jesse. Paul is here, okay. Ian, would you like to say anything?
All I can add, in New Zealand we have the budget is being presented tomorrow, so we will find out if there's a basic income included in that or not. So we're not particularly hopeful, but there has been hints that the government has been looking at it, so we're waiting for tomorrow. So,
Thank you, Ian. Did I spell correctly this time?
No, Ian.
Ian, oh, once again, Ian. Okay, I'm sorry, I will learn. Shabana?
Discussion and the presentation also was very nice by Philip. And now actually I have just one thing to add with regarding to our first working committee. In the working committee 1, we have decided to write one common letter to all religious faith organizations, leaders, and in which already we started with Pope, letter to the Pope. And so in such a case, we have to remove some of the passages that we have given in that. And my suggestion is that we should incorporate the United Nations report, which has included the universal basic income. So we have to use that as a supporting evidence, and we have to incorporate those wordings in the letter that we are writing to religious leaders, so that our letter will become more effective. That's the only simple suggestion. Thank you. It was a good day.
Thank you, Shabana. Dear John, would you like to add any news from Canada? Yes, please.
I'm as usual overwhelmed by the amount of information that comes out in these calls, and sincerely grateful for everyone who's contributing to them. I don't have anything this week. Sheila expressed the Prince Edward Island concept and things that are going on in Canada pretty well, and I really don't have much to add, but thank you again for organizing these, Ali, and thanks for everyone else for being here.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your contributions. Paul Ethel, or Paul, are you there? Paul, would you like to add anything? Okay. Jesse, would you like to? No?
I don't have much to add. These are really great conversations, and I'm really thankful to be able to listen and be a part of that. Just want to say I'm learning a lot. Yeah, basically, like in Canada, there's been a couple of letters sent to people into the Senate and to the Prime Minister from different basic income groups and networks that I'm aware of. And I know for myself personally, I've been invited to speak on a couple of podcasts and Zoom calls that are coming up in the next week and a bit. So I'm just keeping on working and keeping on advocating. So just thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jesse. Only Claudia. Claudia, would you like to say anything? Okay, she's not here maybe because she had written a chat previously. Dear friends,
Ali, if I may, just
yes, please.
Yes, I would like, because if Peter is here, but I'm afraid that he's because with Peter and Shabana, we have been having a discussion in the chat box, and without taking too long, I would just like to put one point. I was really always, we've had this discussion with Peter over and over in Hyderabad, but I'm always a bit surprised with this, this tendency of saying I've seen the numbers and the result is clear, because that tends to assume that other people do not look at the numbers. And here in France, we have been looking at the numbers too. But I think maybe in one short sentence, so Peter was saying something like, wealth tax is very good for the rich, but the poor shouldn't pay a wealth tax. But this is basically, in a nutshell, this is the conclusion which we've reached here, is that just as for a basic income, it's better for the poor that we give the basic income to the rich as well. It's also better for the poor that the poor pay a tax to finance it just as much as the rich. Because currently in France, for instance, the poor, they supposedly pay no tax. Actually, they pay the VAT, but the VAT is sort of invisible. So there's a lot of public discourse about, oh, look at those poor, they don't pay any taxes, they're just being assisted and everything. And then they're entitled to a benefit. And when they start earning money, they're entitled to a different benefit. And then, and then finally, only later, they start paying income tax. And if you translate this into, how much money they, when they work, how much money do they lose? Yeah. So either currently when they start working, they get their for money, they get the money from their boss, and then they get a top up which diminishes. But if you translate this top up in a sort of a tax rate from the social minimum that they had, they currently get taxed more than the rich as a percentage. So you see, this is where it would be more interesting for the poor to get the tax rates of say the middle class, not even the richest, but say of the middle class, than to be not taxed in, formally not taxed on their income, but actually be more taxed, and on top of that being discriminated against. I guess this was sorry, it's a bit heavy for a last comment, but that's the conversation can continue. It was just, I thought I had to be said. I'm sorry Peter wasn't there anymore.
Continue personally later.
Thank you, with pleasure.
Thank you, dear friends. They are all very beneficial, but maybe we are getting tired after 2.5 hours, or almost 3 hours. Yeah, almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are moving forward, so it's good news. Thank you for all of you. Hope to see you next Tuesday. And the discussions regarding the experimental studies was very interesting, very beneficial for me. I hope it was for you too. Hope to see you next Tuesday. And I will send you the details of our national virtual congress of Saturday. If you would like to have a look, please just join.
Ali, are any of those sessions going to be in English?
We were planning to. In fact, I had requested Julio and Malcolm to contribute also. But later on, because of the time limitations, we said we better have a separate session for international contributions. It will be in the coming weeks. But this one will be all in Turkish, and it will be 9 hours long. It will be very interesting for us.
Best of luck with it.
Thank you to all of you. Good evening or good morning, wherever you are.
Bye. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.